All righty. Welcome back, my friends. Shot of caffeine there. Okay, so what we're gonna start cranking on today is where things I don't know. Like for me, this stuff is where stuff gets pretty complicated. Not that the other stuff isn't complicated, but this is where we have to start adding some other kind of skills in there. It's particularly coding skills. So most of us probably haven't done much or any coding ever. And so this can be a little bit challenging. I have a little bit of coding experience, so I recognize some of this stuff, but I would say I'm certainly not strong. But what we find though, well, I guess basically what happens is the Wise integration comes with a bunch of scripts, and that's what we've been using before. And the scripts are what we're dragging onto as components onto our game objects, and we're creating functionality, things like loading the sound banks, loading the ambiances and that sort of things. But generally, and those are all totally valid. But what we a lot of times, or many times, we want to have something like that's attached to, say, an animation or attached to some sort of custom thing in a game. When you when you pick up an object, well, we did the trigger thing, so we can actually we can post sounds through triggers, and that worked pretty well. So if we're creating like if you run through, say, that whatever the coin or some sort of object like that that starts when you that triggers when you, well, we call it posting the event. So what it's doing is it's posting and propagating all the way down into Wise and playing that event, or it's doing that event, and whenever we have the event settings are in Wise, it does that thing. And that's all well and fine, but a lot of times we want to actually have this attached to other stuff that's not necessarily a trigger. So things like footsteps or whatever the a gunshot, like when you're pulling the trigger on a gunshot or something like that. So what that means is when there's some sort of event that's happening, and this is going to happen. Most of the stuff is going to happen higher up when the programmers are developing the animations and the motions and the controls. And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to go in and attach posting events to those things so that we can control Wise from those events. So, um, so oh man, we got super laggy video today. Sorry about that. Hmm. Let me know if it keeps up. Huh? Let me. That sucks. Let's just keep at it. Hopefully it speeds up a little bit. If it doesn't, I might need to restart the class. So I'll log off and log back on again, and see if that helps. Let's try turn off original sound. Um, okay. All right. So I'm only getting 2.4 megabytes per second upload speeds right now. Is it is it still is it still bad? Hmm. Okay. Let's see. I turned off my original sound, so it should the sound quality got worse. So okay, let's forge on. If it gets if it gets out of control bad and you can't see and it's not working, let me know. And worst case scenario, if we can't get this to work, what we'll do is if this isn't working, we'll log off, log back on, and try to see if I can just reset the connection. Maybe it's just a glitch in the connection. If it's not that and it's unusable, what I'll do is I'll just continue on, and I'll record everything, and then I'll just post it so that you can watch it offline soon. So that's worst case scenario. So okay, so back at it here again. Let me know in the comments if there's some bad snags on this. But so what we want to be able to have this, what our scripts do is trigger events based off of things that are happening on in the game. So yeah, like things like gunshots or footsteps or even things like dialogue or just events that are happening in the game. Because most of those events are going to be custom events, things like a fireball hitting the main character, or I guess that's a collision detection one, but those kind of events. So usually what we need to do is we need to write some sort of custom script for this. So that's what we're going to work on a little bit today. And we're just going to look at just the basics on the code here. You're not going to have to be really good at the code, but it would be like the further you go with the code, the more control you'll have. So we're just going to look at just the fundamentals and the basics. And I would recommend just literally following along. The instructions are pretty good for this. There's 3 sections in this one for the lesson 4. And I think the first 2 are really good. The third one is really whack. I'm not even really going to talk about that one as much. So I really want to focus on those first 2. And so that's what we're going to look at. And so those sections are going to be, what did I call them? Posting event using Wwise types, and then and attaching it to an animation. So let's take a look at this. Let me close this. So I'm going to be going to full screen video. This may cause some glitches. So hopefully this doesn't. All right. So let's close out here, and let's open in Unity. So we're going to walk through like the steps on how to create custom so some real basics on how to create custom scripts. And like I said, this is probably my weakest area. So actually, let's get this back. I need to get this back to regular. Okay, we're good. So let's go to certification 301, lesson 4, post events using Wwise types. Okay. Move this to the other screen. Okay. So what we want to do first is we want to create a script. So I'm going to create a script off of my chat window's in the way here. So what I want to do is attach a script. Do I have a generic one there? Let's get rid of this one. Remove component. Cool. So what I want to do is create a script that I'm going to attach to this thing and using a custom script. So we have a couple of ways we can do that. First, we can just create a general in our assets. Usually in your project hierarchy, under your assets, there's almost always going to be a scripts folder. So you're going to have things like scenes, scripts. This one has like standard assets, streaming assets, scene management plugins and stuff. But usually you're going to have things like materials, audio, and that sort of stuff as your principal folders up here. So we can go in scripts, and we have just some basic scripts in here. It doesn't really matter where the scripts are. They don't have to be in the scripts folder. It's just a way to keep things organized. So I'm not going to create anything in here right now. In fact, I'm just going to go over to my player and create a basic script off this one right here. So what is this one? Is this that generic script? Yeah, let's get rid of this one. Cool. And what I want to do now is add new script. So actually, let's get rid of this. So in here, we can say just new script at the very bottom here. So I'm going to add a new script, and we can call it whatever we want. But the thing is, you have to name it. When you name it the first time, it pretty much has to stay that name. So it doesn't matter what it is. It's just as long as you kind of remember what the name it is. So usually the name of the script is going to describe what it does. So in this case, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to post an event using Wwise. So it would make sense to use post Wwise event. So let's do this. And what that did is now that is attached to the player. It doesn't really do anything, but we have a script that's attached to this thing right here, and it's just called post Wwise event. So what we're going to want to do is go in and attach this thing. So we want to the outside the goal here is just to post an event to control Wwise from Unity. So let's go in, and what we're going to do is we're going to double click on that. Right? If I double click on it, it shows where it is, and it's going to open it up inside of Visual Studio. So let's take a look real quick at the anatomy of this script right here. So this is just a generic script that comes in. So when you create a new script, it isn't empty. It actually has some stuff in it right here. So let's just go over this real quick. So this is your namespace up here. This is basically going to allow it to refer to a bunch of other classes and functions in those classes and uh, uh, methods, and like that allows to basically, it's just, they're like libraries. So these are going to be, and we don't need to touch any of that stuff right there. So that always just needs to be right there. Sometimes you'll add other stuff in there, but this is where it just needs to be by itself. And then we have our class right here. So this is a public class, and this is basically this is the name of the thing. I call it right here. And so it's basically called PostWise event, and I call this thing PostWise event. And inside of this PostWise event, we have a couple different functions. So these are our functions down here. So we have two functions that show up by default. So this one right here called start. What this does is when this scene, or when this object is, like when this player is created, and whenever this thing is created, it's going to invoke this function right here. So basically when the scene opens, that's when this thing is going to happen right here. And then we have our void update. And this is something that calls this function every single frame that the game is being played. So if you need something that's being tracked and it needs to keep updated, like where two things are in 3D space, like distance from something else, or I don't know, just like I'm trying to think of things that are like need to keep track of very often. That's what this void update is going to be for right here. So, and if we look at how a function works, so if we just basically look at the anatomy of a function right here, so this thing says void. So says what it's going to return. This not for this kind of programming we're doing right here, but when you create functions. So a function is something that does something, like does some math. Usually it does some sort of math. Well, not necessarily, but it can do. A lot of times we use it for some sort of math or doing something. What we're going to do here is it's going to oftentimes return a value or return something. So it can return a word, it can return a number, it can return something. But in this case, we don't want it to actually return anything. What we're asking our function to do is just do something, do something, do something. We're not asking it to do something and give it back to me and give me the answer. It's just, we're telling it to do something. So when you say that, you're just saying void. So that the void means it's not going to return any value. You're just saying, go do something. And then we have the name of it. So this one right here is for both start and update. These ones are kind of baked into this right here because we're using these namespaces up here. You can create your own, which we will be doing here in just a minute. And then we have these parentheses. And if a function, if you've got a function and you need to give it you need to give it something to do something. So I need to say, give it the number 5 so I can ask it to multiply it by 5 and then give me a value back, or just multiply it by 5. That's where we put an input value. But for these specific functions right here, we don't put anything in there. And then what we see here is we've got two different curly braces. And in programming speak, basically the curly braces encapsulate what you want it to do. This is the code, the internal code for this function right here. And I know I'm blasting this. If you've not seen programming before, that's okay. This will become hopefully a little bit more clear as you run through it a couple of times. But if not, just follow the instructions. You don't have to follow along with me right now, but literally follow the instructions, and it'll get you through it. And then the more you do it, it'll get a little clearer. It takes some repetition to get better at it. But what we also want to do is add some sort of properties to this thing. So a property is some of this stuff over here. So like these are all properties in our inspector right here. So some things where we want to take some sort of property or some sort of value from somewhere else. So what we want to do is we want to add some sort of properties in this thing. So these need to go above this right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a property. So I can say AK, and because we're using these namespaces right here, this will automatically autofill for us right here. So if we do AK dot wise dot, and then we want to do this one, we have a bunch of different things we can do inside this. So basically every time you add a dot, it's kind of like a drilling down into a sub level. So we're starting with the audio connect stuff, which is wise. It's just audio AK.wise. I don't know why you would not use, I don't know why it's not just AKWise, but I haven't spent enough time with it to understand it. And then we have a bunch of different things we can do with this. In this case, what we want to do is you do an event. So what we want to do is we want to be able to call an event. So the goal is we need to add some sort of event. So what we're doing is we're creating essentially a type. Well, I know I'm speaking Greek in a lot of ways, so I'm going to click event here. And so what this is doing right here is it's essentially creating, we're creating a little a property here of this type. So this is what we call it, a type. The type is an event. Specifically, it's an AKWise event, and we need to give this thing a name. So we can call it whatever we want to at this time. So I'm just going to call it my event, and we have to use a semicolon. So semicolons are is like a period in English speak. It's basically, it says at the end of the line, I use a semicolon. And so right now what it did is it created a thing called my event, a property called my event of this type right here. And so, but there's one other things we need to do to this thing to make it so it's accessible. We need to add the word public in front of it. By doing so, if I hit Control S and save this thing and I go back to Unity, what it's going to do is, we'll give it a second so you can see it's thinking right here. It's recompiling the script in the background, and then it's going to update here in a second. So we can see what ended up happening here by creating what we call, by creating this thing, this class, making this thing public right here. By making this thing public right here, it exposes it out to here, and so that other systems can use it. So now what we have is we have this specific thing called my event that I created inside there. If I click on the my event, it allows me to see all the Wwise events right there. So if I want, I can create all sorts of different things. Like I can create my own inputs for this right here. So right now, for this case right now, all we want to do is say my event, and yeah, so this is just a property that shows up in this editor right here. So what we want to do now is we've got this event that shows up in here, but what we want to do is we want to do something with this event. So basically I want to post an event here. We'll come back to that in a second. So let's take a look at it. So now I've got this event that's here, but it's not like it's going to play it or call it or anything. It's not posting it. It's just saying that it exists and that we're connecting Wwise to this event. What we want to do now is actually trigger this event or post. So when I say trigger, what I mean is posting it. When I say posting it means go over to Wwise and do whatever. So when I post an event, it calls this right here, that creates a game call and does one of these things over here. And if we look at whatever enemy, evil, I don't know, let's Magic Blast. When Magic Blast is called, it's going to come over here and do Magic Blast fired and Big Fireball. It's going to play both of those, and both at exactly the same time. There's no delay. So that's what it's going to call. So basically we have the ability to call that for that from over here, but right now it's not going to call it. So what we need to do is we need to trigger this event and create a game call. And so we're going to do that just once as a practice under the start thing, under the start function. So what we want to do first is actually call this my event right here. So, so what we're going to do is say my event. And what we want to do is do this thing called post. So it's called method. And so what we can basically, this event right here has the ability to do what's called a post. And this is a specific kind of function. And what it's going to ask for is the game object. So what we want to say is, I want you to do this event, whatever I define over here. I want you to post it, and I want you to attach it to a game object. So what I have to do is attach it to something to where that sound is coming from. So say I have an enemy running around, and I want that enemy to, like when I shoot it with a bullet, that it grunts. So when it hits that object, I could put the enemy right here in there, and the sound is going to come from that object. But in this case, we want it to come from the person. We'll just keep it simple. We want it to come from the first player, the player that we're on right now. To do that, what's simple is we can actually do a thing called game object. So what game object does is it says, just use the object that I'm on right now, which is the player. So that's going to be the simplest way to do that. And let's make sure we put a semicolon in there. So again, what's going to happen here is we basically create the class for this, or we'll create the class for this thing, and called my event, and then we're going to trigger it and call it right here, and we want to attach it to this game object right here. So I'm gonna hit Control S, save this thing, and every time I go back here, it needs to recompile it. So it takes a second. Sometimes it takes longer than others. And if you get a screw up or an error, it'll tell you that, it'll show up in your console that you have some sort of error right here if you get some bad code. And oftentimes it'll tell you what the line of the code is, so you can actually go over. Actually, let's try and do that. Let's screw it up so we can let's screw it up So my says my internet connection is still unstable. Are you guys still hearing me okay?
Yeah, the screen sharing is actually fine. It's just your like
Uh,
face cam is kind of bad, but other than that, it's fine.
okay. Okay, that's cool. I don't care about my face. So thank you. So let's screw this thing up. So I'm gonna just put posts, and I don't know. I don't even that. Hopefully that doesn't work. So hey, Control S, go over here, and it's gonna come up and probably give me an error right here. So let's take a look at the console. So as assets post wise events, error 13 blah, blah that does not contain definition for posts of type, and so this tells us that something's wrong here. So so basically it's like I think it's line 13 through 17. That's what it's telling me. So line 13 through 17 right here, it says there's something wrong. And usually, and if I double click on this, it'll take me to it. And it says, hey, this is where something's wrong here. So a lot of times when you're trying to troubleshoot a script, especially if you're using somebody else's script, or like basically sometimes these scripts, like if you download some asset from the store and you're using somebody else's scripts and they're written for an older version of Unity and you try to import it in, sometimes there's going to be some sort of mismatches here. So by just double clicking on these will bring you into the script, and that's usually where you can start. If you know what you're doing, you can obviously see it. But if you don't know what you're doing, at least it gives you a place to start searching. You can start Googling around with this sort of stuff to figure out what's wrong with this thing. So in this case, I want to delete that, and that should correct it. And the little red line went away, so it means that we're good. So I go back over here. It's going to recompile it. And are we good? We're good. So it went away. So just tell me that the sound bank is already loaded right there. So now what we need to do is we need to attach something to this event. So what's happening is here is on the start of the game, I want it to post this event right here, attach it to this game object, and it's going to be this what's called my event. Since this is a public class, it needs to be controlled through over here. So all we need to do is just find some sort of sound that will trigger that we can actually be able to hear. And just using what the tutorial said to use, I'm just going to go do something like destruction, region specific, and let's just do rock one right here. So I'll double click on that. So what that did is it attached this event down into, so this my event is now going to be the rock destruction, and then it says post the rock destruction whatever and attach it to this game object right here. So let's hear if it works. There it was. Hopefully you heard that. It was right at the beginning. So but it triggered that event right at the very beginning on the start of the game. So I would say that's like that's an unusual way to do that. Not unusual, but like a less than perfect way of doing that. It's unusual that we want to just load up a sound at the beginning of a level like that. But excuse me. What we're trying to do is just go through and figure out the mechanics on this thing. So that totally works, and yay, it's awesome. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get rid of this thing, and I'm going to get rid of the script right here off my main character. Remove component. So that script still exists, and if I look under my project, it's not, even though I deleted it off my player, it's not like I deleted the script. The script still just exists. It's just right here. It's in fact right here. It's called post Wwise event. So we call that post Wwise event. Is just now it's available, and anybody can use that at any time. And it's a generic script. So if I use it here, it's not going to play the same sound somewhere else. It creates a new instance of that script or object, so to speak, somewhere else. So that's a usable script. So we're actually keep using this. So all this basic one right here, all it does, it says anything that I put in there, it's going to start this on the scene start. We don't really want that going forward, but we'll modify our script in just a second here. So the more useful way of doing this, and this is the second section of the Wwise stuff, is going to be going in and attaching it to an animation. So this is where things like the footsteps or the gunshots or the sword swings or any of that kind of stuff are going to happen, and grunts and fights, and that's where we're going to attach these to our animation here. So what we want to do is like take a look at how we do animations. So let's first look at let's open up let's see what my order event is here. Actually, yeah, we need to go to certification 301 lesson 4 posting events from animations, and we're going to pull up right here, and we see our main character right here. To make this things a little bit easier to see, I'm going to turn off on the gizmos right here. We can turn off the 3D icons just so I can see my character a little bit more clearly right now. So, and we can move around, but let's just keep her centered kind of right there. It's a good thing to see her from the side. So what we want to do is take a look at the animations on this, and let's see, what the order I want to do this thing. Okay. So instead of what we want to look at is I want to modify this script now. So instead of doing this on the start, what we want to do is have this thing trigger on when the footstep is going down. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a custom function. So it's called player footstep, and so it's going to trigger every time that it's not going to know because we have to assign it, but every time the player's foot hits the ground, that's when we want it to post the event. And this is one of the things that we couldn't control in Cube. And if you recall, basically when we were running around Cube, it would post the footsteps like really, really, really fast, which is really annoying. So, but since we didn't have control over Cube, we couldn't really deal with that. So, but in here we do have the ability to control every single time that goes, or maybe you have like a gunshot or some sort of a machine gun. So a machine gun, like if we think about something, yeah, like a machine gun, we could sit there, we can say, when the player pulls the trigger, start the machine gun sound and just repeat the sound over and over and over and over and over. Or it could be that when we pull the machine gun, that every time a bullet, like every time the bullet leaves the say a rifle or a machine gun, that it's going to explode and create a gunshot sound. So boom, 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 boom. So we may have something that's going to post events over and over and over and over and over again. And you can kind of decide how you want to do that. But these events can post very quickly. It's kind of like, think about it like a MIDI, like a MIDI event. That's kind of like what we're thinking about here. So a MIDI event could be done either the MIDI event could, you hold the trigger, you hold the key down, and it just does the machine gun, or you have to hit the key multiple times to actually create that machine gun sound. So what we want to do is we want to create. So we'll leave this fine where it is. But what we want to do is we want to create our own functions. So these functions don't actually need to be here. We don't need these because we're going to create our own function, and those can be taken out if you're not using them at any time. So what we want to do is we want to create a public function. So we're going to go. We want to go public with this, and what public means is just, it means allowed. It makes it allowed to be used by other objects and other. It exposes it to the greater ecosystem, so that other objects can start to use this thing, so that other scripts and other functions can use this function by itself. And we want to do a void because we're not going to return anything in this case, but we're going to call this, we can call it whatever we want to. So we're basically creating this function called play footstep sound. And in this case, we're not going to feed it anything. And what we want it to do is, we say basically what we want to have happen is every time a footstep hits, I want to play this footstep sound. So this is called play footstep sound, and let's tell it what we want it to do. And so what we want it to do is we want it to play this sound up here. So that event posting that we did, we have to do that same thing we did. So my event dot post, and we want to attach it to the player object again. So it's just, in this case, game object. We could attach it to something else if we wanted to, but we wanted to play game object. So now what we do is every time I call this function right here, it's going to play this sound. So the cool thing is now from somewhere else inside of Unity, I can say play footstep sound, play footstep sound, play footstep sound, play footstep sound. We haven't done anything with the terrain or anything like that yet, but we're going to be getting the RTPCs next class. So that's what we're going to be talking about, how to control the real-time parameters from the next class. So if we run on sand, or if we run on grass, or run on water or metal or wood or anything like that, we can change that. But right now, all it's going to do is call the footstep sounds. So save this thing out. Back over to Unity, it'll update itself. And so I got this one little like possible error here. It says the inconsistent line endings in asset, this one right here. Some are in Mac OS Unix and some are in Windows. This might be line number stack traces compiler errors, but this is a minor error, so we don't really have to worry about it. I didn't seem to cause me any problems. The only ones that are real problems are the red ones. If you get a red one, that means it won't work. The yellow ones are just warnings. The red ones means they're actually a full-on compiler error. So now what we got to do is we want to attach that to the footsteps of this player. So how do we do that? Attach it to animations. So when you create an animation, animations are usually going to be created in some other software like 3D Studio Max or Maya or any of those. Is anybody actually, I'm curious, does anybody have any 3D animation skills? Has anybody ever done any 3D animation before or 3D modeling? No. No.
It's been a really long
I don't know how
time.
to do it all. Oh, is
Can you hear
my
me?
sound screwed up? I'm hearing some weird stuff on my end. Hey, can you guys hear me okay? Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, I'll keep going. Please let me know if something's screwed up. So what we want to do now is look at the animation here. So when you create an animation in, so there's like, there's all this crazy, crazy mechanics that go behind it. It's really hard to do animation. At least I think so. But you can do things like mocap, like motion capture, where you basically attach the little balls to a person and they can capture that motion. You can attach it to a skeleton of like say an ogre or a monster or something like that. But if you're doing something like a dragon or a spider or something like that, that you can't actually mocap a spider or a dragon because they don't exist. You have to create animations yourself, and it's really insanely complicated how this stuff works. Basically, you create a skeleton and then you can move it around in 3D space. So if I have my carrot player right here, these are all kind of the objects and the rotations that they have. I'm not entirely sure how it works. I would like to learn more about this stuff, but I don't know how to do animation stuff. So what we want to do is we want to attach our sounds to these animations. So at this point, the game designers have already built this thing out and they actually have this thing working. So sorry, I gotta wait for my thing to walk away. Can't. So if we go to Window, Animation, and it's Control-6, but if we just pull up the animation window right here, let's move this back up to the top. And I'm going to click animation on the player. Well, actually what I want to do is I want to move this down into this tab so I can actually just use this thing. And what we see here is all the animations for this thing. So we have player idle hammer. These are all the different kind of animations that they have set up for this character right here. So we can do player run. And actually, let's do player sprint. So player sprint is the one that they use. So let's do player sprint. Actually, let's do shoot magic just because I think that's interesting. So these are all the different things that are going to be happening. These are all the joints that are happening here, and then these are the keyframes. So what these do is these keyframing tells it where to be. Well, it usually tells it where to be in 3D position. Like it tells it where to rotate, where to move to, and this is all kind of exported out of the animation software. We don't need to worry about any of this stuff right here. But if we so what we can do is we can drag across here and watch her do her thing. Like so this is where it starts with, so she does that, like throws like some sort of like magical spell or something like that. So we can travel back and forth and see it. She's kind of hovering, which is interesting. I don't know why she's floating like that. But if we do that's shoot magic, let's do player sprint. And we don't really need to see. I don't know why. Like I can't see. Let's turn off some of the gizmos. No, it's okay. Don't need to worry about all that. So basically, what we see is we can run, boom, boom, and if we press play, we can watch it cycle back and forth. You can watch it on a loop. So what we want to do is every time the foot hits the ground, we want to actually not trigger, but like I said, I was pulling the trigger there because I thought the trigger. We want to post that event. So we created that function, and we basically want to call that function every single time this footstep hits right here. So what we're going to do is we watch it just every keyframe, so we can see that right there. That's where one foot hits the ground. So and then it looks like there's another one right there. Yeah, it could be either 14 or 15. We'll try 15. So let's start here. And we don't have to worry about any of this stuff down here. This isn't really important to us. So what we do care about is this timeline right here, right underneath the timeline. If it's say add animation event, And in this case, what I want to do is I want to call a function. So, and over here we have like a list of functions that are available to us, and it's going to be pretty huge. But let's see. Let's see. What did I call that one? I called it play footstep sound. Let's see. Do I not see it in there? Let me go back. I should see it. Oh, part of it is also on this. I didn't attach my script to this. So I changed my script right here so that it, basically every time this gets called, it's going to trigger event, but I didn't actually attach to my character here. So in here, I need to go attach that script. So I'm going to attach that script to my player. Post-wise event script. Open that one up, and I need to change the event. So in this case, I want to change the event to player sound make specific player footstep. So in this game, they don't have a bunch of different terrain footsteps. It's just basically player footstep, or at least I don't think. So if I go to player footstep and we go over to Wise, we can see what that player footstep looks like. So if we go to make sure non-world, no, let's do player. Where's the footstep one? Movement, player footstep. Oh, so they do have a switch. They do have it. Different ones right there. But the event is just going to be player footstep and player footstep. And we can get a little bit of information about what's going on with the player footstep right there. So inside the player footstep, it's going to call this footstep surface right here. And then depending on what the RTPC is, it's going to control what the sound is that's actually playing right there. So we've now got player footstep here, and it's going to work on the animations. Let's get back to the animation bit right here. And I want, in this script right here, I want to player footstep sound. Because I attached that script to this, and it was because it was a public function, it's exposed right here. So if I didn't have that thing as public, it wouldn't show up in this list right here. But so now what it's going to do is it says, I want you to call this function. And basically what that function does is it goes back here. It says, this is called play footstep sound. It's going to play the sound on the person that is on the script that it's attached to. Cool. So now we can go over, let's go over here and find the other one. So boom. It could be 14 or 15. Let's do 15. That animation event. And we also want to call play footstep sound. Cool. Save this and see if it works. So I don't hear anything right now. If I start running, I do hear it. It's subtle, but it's there. Let me put my other headphone in. Yep, it works. So it's a little weird, but basically that what allows us that workflow right there is extremely powerful, because now we can start adding all sorts of sounds to our animations right there. We don't need to worry about the animation itself, but we have, like, I don't know how to do any of that, controlling any of the animation, but what we can do is we can start adding events, like posting events to that. So that's huge for the footsteps, or if you have like magic spells or any of that kind of stuff, that's how we're going to actually add that in there. And you can create a lot of different custom scripts for different sounds, or you can create one gigantic one, like a posting of like a post-wise event, and you can have a bunch of different functions in here, and you can call those different functions to based off of different events that you need to have happen. And you can be more complex in this. You can do multiple sounds and multiple events, or you can do just a single one. So that's hugely powerful right there. So honestly, so then what we do is we go on and we can start going on to the next section. So the next section is, and I don't like this one. I'm actually gonna have to call it before this one because I'm so weak at this one. What they wanted us to do is go through and trigger the sword sounds based off of the microphone input. And oh yeah, sorry. So capsule for body object. Sorry, I missed that. Like, what are you guys talking about? Like, Trent, what are you talking about? I do, but it's been a really long time. What are you talking? Like, is that what you guys do in private chat? That's fine if you are, but I just didn't know if
No.
I'm supposed to answer that.
Um, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. So my audio is really screwed up now too. I need to recycle my interface. Hang on. My interface is when I'm in Windows, it loses sync every once in a while. Hang on for a second. I got to recycle this thing. I'm gonna stop my share.
Sorry, give it a second. It's got to reboot. I'm using my crappy webcam mic right now, but I'm waiting for my Mode 2 to start back up. Okay. Come on.
Hello. Cool. Okay, Trent, can you hear me back? What were you talking about?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now.
All right. Yeah, so that was my answer to the animation thing because I went to the Art Institute for a couple years for video game development, and we did some work in Unity and did animation. We did like mocap and by hand with the keyframes and setting up the rigs.
Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. Oh, that's awesome. That's cool that you did that. Um, what were you designing in, or what were you animating in?
We did most of the stuff in like 3ds Max or
Yeah.
Maya.
Okay.
I did a lot more Maya work for some reason, even though like most places use 3ds Max. So that whole place is
Yeah. Well, they don't exist anymore. Yeah.
for good reason.
Yeah. Bummer. Um, cool. And Jordan, what were we talking about? Capsule stuff?
Oh, yeah, I just when you were playing that animation, it looked like they used they used some kind of game object, a 3D game object, like the capsule for
Yeah.
the body, looks
That
like.
that's usually that's the
For
oh, here,
animating or
we'll go full
something.
screen again. The reason being is that it's that's the collider for the up person. So basically, when she runs, so that's basically what when she runs into something. That's because when you create colliders, you can create really complex colliders that are the person, but it's way CPU intensive. So just using a capsule is like about the size of a person. That's how they use the capsule for the collider stuff. So if you look over here on the player, it's a capsule collider, and that's what makes it so she doesn't run through walls and stuff like that. But instead of just using the actual mesh collider, you're using a capsule collider. But yeah, that's for the most part close enough. But as things get better, I mean, because we've all seen it in games where you can kind of like run halfway through a wall, or you can't even get near the wall because so if I run this capsule collider right here and I scale this thing up, like where's my capsule collider? I could scale this thing gigantic if I wanted to. Oops, that's not my scale. I could just grow this up a little bit, grow this one up a little bit. If I make it that big, she won't be able to like touch anything, and so yeah, that's just the capsule collider. So, but it closely enough represents a human being that works pretty well. So, cool. Let's see. Nice, cool. Yeah. So basically, what they want to what they want us to do in the next one is create a script that basically allows you to trigger using the microphone input. And I feel like this case is kind of an edge case. And I know that what they're trying to do is they're trying to incorporate the use of connecting Wwise. So basically, in here, you create what we did is we'll go through and we create an audio object right here called microphone, a sound effects microphone. So one of the things that we can look at here is we can actually take the Wwise audio input right here as a source. So if I were well, let's actually let's run through it a little bit. I'll go ahead and get kind of like at least the basics on this thing. So if I want to create a new audio object, let's create a sound effects object, and we'll call it microphone. So if I create just a sound effects object by default, usually in the past, most of what we've been doing is importing game audio. But in this case, I'm just creating an audio object that goes, I don't know what you want to use. I want to create some sound with this thing. So on this one, in our general set, well, I guess it doesn't matter general, but we have to say what we want the sound source to be here. And so we can sound source. We can actually do Wwise audio input, and it allows us to use the input of the microphone right there, which is kind of cool. And what we're going to do is, instead of routing it, basically we want to use the level of the microphone as a threshold to create a trigger. So what we don't want to do is we want to make sure that this does not pass all the way out. So we don't want to get any feedback. So what we're going to do is create on our actual, we can actually create a bus called microphone right here. Actually, I'll just delete it and I'll redo it since before. So what we want to do is we want to take in the input from the audio, but we don't want to actually hear it. So what we can do is we can actually turn it down. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to turn it down here, because this fader is essentially pre-effects. So we need a post-effects fader to turn it down. And so what we'll do is we'll create a bus in here under non-world. Let's create a new sub bus. Create a new audio bus. We'll call it microphone. And on this one, we turn it down. And now we need to assign microphone to that bus. So instead of going to master audio bus, we want to send it to microphone right here. So what that's going to allow us to do is take in the audio and like use it, but actually don't send it back out to anywhere. So it's not going to go and make any sound. And what we're going under effects right here, under our effects, we have the ability to change this to, was it Wwise meter right here? Meters, microphone meter. And what that does is it basically monitors the input of the microphone. So in here, what we can do is just change this to microphone. This was defaulted originally to none, and what we want to do is change that to player. Or where was that? Which one was that under? Generic. Oh, there it is, microphone level. So it's under generic. And what this is going to do is monitor the microphone level, and we could send that out to, I'm not entirely sure how this thing works. This thing is confusing to me. So I guess basically if it's getting a minimum of -48, it says it's like turns it on. If it doesn't have it, it turns it off. I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of like a gate or something like that. It's not entirely clear to me how that works. So just to be clear, so the microphone sound effects comes in, and it sends it to that, and then basically it's got this effect that basically tracks it. So what we can do is then we can access that level from inside of Wwise using from inside of Unity using a script. So maybe I'll just take a glance at this thing. I've only gone through this thing once, and so I'm not very good at this one. So let's go over to posting audio input and go back to project, look at our player. And in this case, what we want to do is, sorry, I have to look at my notes here. Let's do this. So what we're going to do over here is add, we already added it here, but I'm going to get rid of it. I have to reset this a little bit. Remove component. So they've got a preset built called AK microphone. So if we want to grab the microphone, they've already created a pre-built script for us. Audiokinetic has. So let's add a component, and we'll do AK microphone. This AK microphone. What this AK microphone is going to do is allow us to trigger an event. And so this one, I don't know, like if it's just built for this level or what they're doing with it, but basically it allows us to create a trigger an event based off the microphone input right here. So actually I need to rebuild my sound banks over here. So generate all. Oh, the other thing I didn't do, yeah, so I created the microphone, but I don't have a microphone input right here. So I created a microphone event Let's see. Or did I not delete? Did I not create that? Let me create. What do they want to call this thing? Let's create an event. Sorry, I need to change this. I gotta find out what my notes are. It's an event. I guess I'll call it. Oh, okay. It's just microphone level. So they've got, I think it's under player. What is it under? Generic. Microphone level. Okay, so basically I created a thing called microphone level, and now I need to the microphone event, and I want to attach this to some sort of event. And so the event is going to be, what do I want to attach it to? The sound effect is going to be enable microphone. That's what we need to do over here. Sorry, this one's, I'm clunky on this one. Enable microphone. So I created an event over here. I'll delete this one. I'll just delete it and recreate it. Let's create a new event. So new event, play. I'm gonna call this one enable microphone. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to play this microphone sound right here. Cool. Now, and I need to put this one, this enable microphone. You don't have, so I created this enable microphone right here, and because it's already under this generic, or it's already inside of one of these here. I don't actually have to assign it to a sound bank. It's automatically assigned to a sound bank based off of some of these folders that it's created right here. So you don't actually have to do that. And I'm a little fuzzy on that one. That's pretty kind of cool though. Basically, with this sound bank, like right here, you can say anything that's an event, sound, ambient, dungeon. You can basically create folders so it automatically adds things. When you create events, it automatically adds them to sound banks, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to hit generate all again. Make sure that we're good. Cool. No errors. We're looking good there. So now what we need to do over in Unity is we want to attach that to an event, that event right there, microphone event. And I'm going to choose, where was that? It was under generic, player, general. Which one was that under? I already forgot. Default working it. Enable microphone. Is that the one I wanted to do? Yeah. Cool. So what this is doing now is it's basically going to say that it's going to enable the microphone and look at the microphone level. And like, I don't know how to set that threshold, but basically it's basically every time I get above -48 defined over in Wwise, it's going to actually trigger this thing and send the sound out. But what we want it to do is we want it to play a sound. And the sound we want to have play is going to be the player attack sound. So this one right here. So if we look at this player attack script right here, this player attack, well, let's double click on it and just take a look and see what it's doing. So this one's pretty big. I guess we can't really go underneath all of this stuff. This has a lot of different functions. So it's a little more than we want to be able to deconstruct. But it is worthwhile to go in here and start looking at, see if you can start to understand how this thing works. But it's okay. It's a little complicated out of the gates right here. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to invoke this script when this thing happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this player attack script and we're going to drag it right here. Non-object. And we want to do the player attack right here. And the function that we want to have it do is this function is player attack swing. Cool. So what that's going to do is essentially the train of thought here is we're calling this we're monitoring the sound from Wise, and when the threshold gets above a certain sound, I want you to invoke this function right here. So I think that's all we're gonna have to do here. Let's just see if this thing works. Save it, run. Boom. Attack. Yeah. Hands free. So it works. So that was a little funky to me. Like, I feel like that was a little convoluted, but what they're trying to show here is how well, I don't like the idea that they're using a microphone input. That one to me is a little vague, but it is cool that we can use the microphone input as an input source instead of just using hands. It doesn't do things like voice recognition or any of that kind of stuff, but it's just talking about how to use the monitoring, which I've never done before in Wise over here. So, yeah, I mean, in essence, that's the introduction to scripting. Let's say that. That's like a basic introduction to scripting. So, that's all we really had for today. So, I thought it was like I wanted to get further into experimental scripting, but I didn't quite have time to get up to where I wanted to with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some experimenting on my own, and like I said before, what I think is a good challenge is you follow the exercises and then you go create your own game and try to invoke the same ideas using the same concepts same ideas using your own scripts and using your own game all together, and see if you can get the scripting to work, and that'll really kind of set the hook on this and like really drive it home. But for right now, like I think that's all. Like I haven't done that myself yet, so I want to go run through that myself. Cool. So I guess like before, like we'll call it a little bit early today, but before we move on, is there any questions? Okay. So since we're calling it a little bit early, what I would like you to do is jump on this thing and try it out. Go in there. This one took me about an hour to get through the first time, just because I was taking some time. Yeah, there's definitely lots of stuff to do over the weekend. Me too. I have a lot of myself to do a lot over the weekend. But the more you do it, the more it becomes real. But we're going to continue on with the scripting. So what we're going to do next class is look at how to control real-time parameter controls with scripting. Things like when we did the terrain, when we run between the different like terrains, how do we do switch states? How do we control switch states in Wise from Unity using the scripting kind of thing? And I think once we loop through this a couple times, it'll start to become a little bit more real. But the challenge for me is going to be going through and doing it with my own game, and I think that's when it's going to become real. So, cool. All right. Well, I guess let's go ahead and call it there for today. So I'll stick around if anybody has any questions. But have a killer weekend, and I will So what I would like you guys to do for next time is like I said, we're going to try and wrap up. I want to try to get through all of these things by next week. So this is lesson 4, I think, that we're on right now. So I want you to try to get through lesson 5 by the weekend, and then we're gonna do 6, 7, 8 during next week. So it's a lot of stuff. We'll take it. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I'll be reasonable about this, but I do want to wrap this up pretty soon so we can start moving on to some other stuff. But if it takes us 2 weeks to get through it, we'll get through it. But try to see if you can get through lesson 5 by the end of the weekend. It shouldn't take too long. You'll be all right. So, all right, cool. All right. I will catch you guys on the flip side, and I will see you next week.
Have a good one.